Good morning from Thailand and good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. This is a warm welcome to Youth Forum on promoting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons among ASEAN youth. This event is sponsored by Universitas Southeast Asia Chapter, Forum for Nation Building Nepal, AIT Sustainable Club, and Nuclear Disarmament 101. Be Human, and Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. This event is mainly organized by Universitas, which is a youth initiative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. And today we have gathered here to discuss an important issue, nuclear disarmament, and its relevance to the ASEAN region. Nuclear disarmament is a complex issue that requires a multidisciplinary approach. It is a matter of international security and moral and ethical imperative. We believe that youth of ASEAN are critical in promoting nuclear disarmament and ensuring a safer world for future generations. To facilitate the discussion, we have an esteemed panel of 3 distinguished speakers who will enlighten us with their knowledge and expertise. First, Mr. Amir, Hamzah, Mohd, Nasir from Multilateral Security Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia. He will provide general remarks about the TPNW and discuss its importance in the ASEAN region. Second, Dr. Muhadi Sugiono, a lecturer at the Department of International Relations and a researcher at the Institute of International Studies, University of Gadjah Mada. Today, he will enlighten us with his insights on regional universalization efforts and examine the TPNW. Lastly, Ms. Ariel Karn, the research team director at the New Global Order. She will share her thoughts on the role of ASEAN youth in promoting the TPNW. And we have our moderator today here, Kun Pasawan Tipsakon, who is the seasoned moderator with over 4 years of experience facilitating group discussion and moderating panels for various events by ASEAN and the US Embassy in Thailand. We hope that this event will foster productive discussions and generate valuable insights on promoting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons among ASEAN youth. Thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator, Ms. Pasawan Tipsakon, to take over the floor and lead us through this critical discussion on promoting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons among ASEAN youth. Ms. Tipsakon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. I'm very excited to be here, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm very excited to be here. My name is Pon. I'll be your moderator during this session. So we have a very informative and interesting and discussions that we're going to do today. And the first topic, we're going to focus on the general remarks about the TPNW and the importance of the ASEAN region. So discussion we have between us and Mr. Amir, Hamzah, Mohd, Nasir from Multilateral Security Division from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia. So Mr. Amir Nasir joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia in 2012. He served at several portfolios in the ministry, including in the Southeast Asia Division and OIC and Regional Cooperation Division. Upon endorsement of the Asia Pacific Group, he served as one of the vice chairs in the bureau of the 76th session of the First Committee of the General Assembly, overseeing various issues of disarmament and international security. He currently serves at the Multilateral Security Division in the Foreign Ministry in Putrajaya, Malaysia. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We are very excited to have you here. How are you doing, Mr. Amir?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I hope you are doing well as well.
Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about the general remarks about the TPNW and the importance of ASEAN region. So can you tell us more about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and why is it significant?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and I wish to thank the organizers for convening this exciting and important virtual discussion. And I always take this opportunity and others to bring perspectives together, exchange views and ideas. And this is not about giving a full brief or lecture about the issue, is about inculcating interest, understanding different perspectives and ideas. And I'm very appreciative of the participants who are with us today. And I really hope that one day we could all meet in person and could continue the collaboration and engagement. I wish to bring a big picture perspective before talking about the TPNW, because a lot of times when we engage with the youth and the young people, they tend to bring a lot of energy and excitement to the table. And because of that, it's important that we begin with the right frame of mind. And that frame of mind that I find to be very useful is to look from the history of human civilization or human existence, where for many hundreds of years or thousands of years, human has existed, but there were times when humans have been challenged by wars and conflicts and so on and so forth. So in this current era, our challenges and conflicts come in many forms: poverty, lack of access to clean water, lack of access to education, and even real crises that have been happening. And a lot of the issues and crises and global order today rely on the principle of peace and security that connects to the concept of nuclear weapons possession. So when you bring in the topic of Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, I think what I can say is that it connects to the important and urgent concern pertaining to the possession of nuclear weapons. And to briefly address the point, the TPNW is a treaty that was adopted in July 2017. It was a strong signal by the international community as a form of concern about the continued possession of nuclear weapons, that nuclear weapons continue to be possessed and used in various forms of national security of countries, which will come at a risk of compromise to countries that do not rely or possess nuclear weapons. And of course, the details of the TPNW, I think we could touch upon later on, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much. So can you tell us more, why is the ASEAN region important for this issue?
So I'm sure our participants have background on the issue of the TPNW, or for those who might be interested to know more, I'm sure they will do further research and studies to understand the details of the treaty, the background history of it, and so on and so forth. But if we look at the bigger context of the TPNW, it is a treaty that brings countries from all around the world united with the same goal, that is to establish a world without nuclear weapons. If we look around many open sources and materials, it shows us that nuclear weapons continue to exist, to be possessed by countries in different corners of the world, and that is a concern. So because of that, through the ambit of TPNW, countries and other important stakeholders could galvanize the support to push for the cause of having a world without nuclear weapons. In many parts of the world, there are crises and challenges. ASEAN is particularly unique because of the history that our region has. If you compare our region and other regions around the world, people will commonly refer to ASEAN as the ideal region to live in. The fact that countries could exist and collaborate and coexist in harmony and peace. And because of that history and context, it gives ASEAN a strong moral leadership that others are looking at us, because when we speak with a voice of principle and integrity and credibility. Oftentimes, countries or a group of countries will make a pronouncement, but people will argue that their actions are not tallied to their words. But when it comes to ASEAN, we can speak with credibility and integrity that we say no to nuclear weapons, and that is in fact what we've been doing. So because of that, in the context of creating a world without nuclear weapons, ASEAN has a solid leadership in that, because in simple terms, other people or other countries will listen to what ASEAN as a region or what ASEAN countries have to say on the matter.
And how can the TPNW be promoted in the ASEAN region, now that we see the importance of this issue in our region?
So, of course, having the benefit of participants from the youth group with us, I think the question can be best answered by them. In any kind of a situation or scenario, we have the challenge in front of us, we have the end goal. So the question is, how do we get there? The challenge is that we continue to have nuclear weapons in existence. The end goal is having a world without nuclear weapons, which of course involves the elimination and destruction of nuclear weapons. How do we get there? A lot of ways and a lot of steps that we can consider and explore. As a starting point, we can look through the region of ASEAN. Some countries have made progress when it comes to expressing their support, expressing their endorsement to the TPNW through the form of signing and ratifying the treaty. Some countries are in the midst of going through the internal processes, going through parliaments and Senate and national legislation to be able to sign and ratify the treaty. And some other countries are perhaps at the very start of the process. So to begin with, we should galvanize our efforts and work to make sure that ASEAN countries, all 10 ASEAN countries, move in one direction, to make sure that the treaty is fully supported by ASEAN countries as a whole, and that will help by ensuring the region of ASEAN is protected. At this stage, as we speak, there is a concern that external parties or other countries could come in and intervene or interfere in the matters of the region of ASEAN. So because of that, there is a need to safeguard the region and to make sure that support is being continued. We have to develop or increase the level of awareness. Awareness is one, and creating and promoting awareness, I think, is again the expertise of the youth. How do we make sure that everybody talks about the threat of nuclear weapons in the same way that is really concerning, and we cannot simply close our eyes and pretend that it's not there. It is there. And secondly, when we talk about bringing progress, when we talk about moving forward, is about making sure that the issue of nuclear weapons is always at the front and center in major international discussions. And that is the efforts that we could start with by developing the leaders of tomorrow. We have the youth today who are thinking about their contributions to the world in the future. And my suggestions to colleagues out there in this group is to think about your contribution to your country, your contribution to your region, and your contribution to the world. One way to go about it is to help the cause increase the level of awareness, increase the level of importance of the issue, to make sure that this is not just a matter of creating noises. This is a matter of continuing our collective security so that ourselves, our families, our children, grandchildren, and our community as a whole continue to be protected, to continue to live in peace and harmony, and continue to be safeguarded against the threat of nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amir. That was a great ending. Now we're doing this webinar. It's already increasing our knowledge and awareness about this issue. So thank you very much. Just want to give you guys a heads up that we're going to do a Q&A session after all the speakers. So if you have any questions, you can write them down in a box chat. So we will ask our speakers later on to answer your questions. So let's move on to the next one, the next topic about the universalization efforts in the region and the examining the TPNW. Our speaker, Dr. Muhadi Sugiono, lecturer at the Department of International Relations and a researcher at the Institute of International Studies from Universitas Gadjah Mada. He's a lecturer in the Department of the International Relations, and he also a researcher in one of the university institutes, the Institute of International Studies, the Indonesian partner of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And he is a former head of some critical centers in the universities, such as the Center for Security and Peace Studies and the Center for Southeast Asia Social Studies. So welcome, Dr. Muhadi Sugiono. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. How are you?
We're great. Thank you so much for being here with us. So can we talk about the essential for Indonesia to join the TPNW?
Well, this is a quite interesting question because this is not only you who can ask this. A few weeks ago, I went to the parliament in Indonesia in the framework of the ratification process in Indonesia. And that was also the very same question that was asked by the parliamentary member. Why Indonesia should join the TPNW? Of course, the easier response is because Indonesia has signed the TPNW. But the answer is much more complex than that. For Indonesia, I guess joining TPNW is a logical sequence of its political stance on nuclear weapons issue. How we explain this? There are various aspects which can explain this. First, if you look at the Indonesian constitution clearly obligates the government to actively contribute to international peace. Now, when it comes to peace, what we understand peace? If we understand peace in the very broad sense, it is not simply the absence of war, the absence of conflict, then the existence of around 15,000 nuclear warheads is not a condition for peace, of peace for us, because the existence of 15,000 nuclear warheads now is overshadowing us, and they are ready to eliminate us from Earth and the Earth as well. So this is the reason why Indonesia needs to join the TPNW. And the second reason is that Indonesia has consistently promoted nuclear disarmament. In the statement of one of our foreign ministers, nuclear disarmament is one of the DNA of Indonesian foreign policy. So Indonesia participated in various international negotiations, and it is also a state party of various treaties aiming at regulating, limiting, as well as eliminating nuclear weapons, like NPT, of course. And I think along with Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia has established Southeast Asia as nuclear weapon-free zone. Correct, Mr. Hamzah? And the third reason, the third reason is that when we look at the TPNW in the process of adoption, Indonesia has been among the strong advocates, along with Malaysia and Thailand, of course, from the very beginning. And the ratification process is now underway in Indonesia, as I mentioned earlier. It took a bit longer, much longer than Thailand, of course, because Thailand has monism legal system in which once international treaty is signed, it become automatically ratified. But in the case of Malaysia and Indonesia, we need to go through the parliamentary process. And the parliamentary process is one thing, and the Indonesian government need to make sure that the ratification of TPNW will not conflict with other legal framework in Indonesia. So that's why the process took so long, but I'm glad to inform you that the process is now in the hand of the parliament, and we will see that Indonesia will ratify very soon. And there is another but very, very important reason why Indonesia need to ratify TPNW and ratify it sooner than later. We have to look at the geopolitical dynamics of our region in the Asia Pacific, especially with the AUKUS agreement to facilitate Australia with nuclear marine. Joining TPNW will send a strong message to Australia that the decision is unwelcome, not only by Indonesia, but also by other ASEAN member countries like Malaysia. Indonesia and Malaysia are among the strongest critics of the decision by Australian government to acquire nuclear submarines. I think those are various considerations that make it necessary for Indonesia to join TPNW.
It's very informative, especially you mentioned the geopolitics in the Asia Pacific and how we all can send a strong message within the region. That really makes the whole thing's like it's a center for us as many ASEAN countries in the region as well. So seems like it's very very important for all of us to shed light on this issue and join the TPNW. What are some reasons for the opposition to the TPNW, and how can we understand or refute them?
Yeah, the most important opposition against TPNW is, of course, from the nuclear weapon states. From the very beginning, they opposed the idea of having TPNW. The reason for them that has been put forward by them is that the TPNW is simply incompatible with the NPT, which means that if we adopt TPNW, then it will obstruct the goals of the NPT. It will derail the disarmament process that takes place under the NPT. So that is the strongest argument that they can put. But this argument can easily be refuted, simply because the failure of the NPT to bring a clear progress in nuclear disarmament is because of the legal gap within the NPT. There is a legal gap within the NPT. So while requesting the nuclear weapon state to gradually reduce and finally eliminate their nuclear weapons, there hasn't been any legal framework as to how this should be done. So without clear legal obligation, nuclear disarmament depends solely on the goodwill of the nuclear weapon states. The fact that the NPT Review Conference failed to show any significant progress, it only means that nuclear weapon states do not have any commitment to nuclear disarmament. So we cannot depend simply on their commitment, but we need a very clear legal framework to force them to start with the disarmament. And this is why we need TPNW. So instead of derailing NPT, TPNW is complementary to the NPT. This is our argument to refute their argument. The second opposition to the NPT comes from the view of the effectiveness of the NPT. Many believe that the NPT will not be effective simply because no single nuclear weapon state are supporting the NPT. So how we refute this? To be honest, there is no single international law which can be considered fully effective. breaking international treaties by state parties or neglecting their obligation is not an exceptional case. Why this should be a problem with NPT? Which means that this does not mean that we simply get rid of the laws or treaties, simply because many countries break the laws or many countries do not fulfill their obligation. No, this is the wrong way to think about. In addition, TPNW will surely work. Of course, it works in the sense that it will affect the behavior of the nuclear weapon states, both directly and indirectly, even without they support the NPT. For example, the NPT work by affecting the business legal framework. Because of the TPNW, then all business related to nuclear weapons are being illegal businesses. So dealing with illegal business activity will be very risky for many, especially big companies and so on and so on. And the NPT has already have an impact with the decision by some companies to withdraw from investing their money to nuclear weapon production, research, and development. That's, I think, my idea.
Wow, very. I like the fear of the effectiveness of the TPNW and how it affects many aspects in our life. And what are some of the dangers of the nuclear weapons, and how can we tackle these issues? Or in your
as Mr. Hamzah mentioned, the danger of nuclear weapon has been exposed in various occasions, but I would like to focus on one. Nuclear weapons are existential threat. The use of nuclear weapons will not only cost human life, but also the earth which support human beings' existence. So it will destroy everything that we need, destroy environment, polluting the environment, which make the earth uninhabitable. And at the end, we will face hunger, and then we will kiss to ashes as a human being. The catastrophic impact of nuclear weapon has been shown by destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can see how catastrophic the impact of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And there are many pictures you can see, you can search in the internet, and some survivors are still alive today, suffering from the diseases that they cannot be cured. And that was the scale of the bomb dropped in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But now contemporary nuclear weapons have more sophisticated technologically and much more destructive capacity than those dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So you can imagine the catastrophe resulted from the nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and multiplied by not only hundreds, but probably 1,000 times than those dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this is much more catastrophic. And life under the threat of nuclear weapons seems to be uncertain whether we are still alive in the next days or months or years, especially with the geopolitical situation like what happened in Europe, but also worryingly in Asia Pacific today.
So it's the essential threat, and how can we tackle these issues? Do you think joining the TPNW is one of the main steps or the first steps that we all should take?
So the world today is facing two basically existential threats. One is climate change, and the other is nuclear weapons. People around the world are combating climate change. So they try to limit the climate to change. And as to the nuclear weapon, there is no other way. There is only one way to eliminate nuclear weapons as the only way to save human being and life on Earth. And I would like to end this presentation by quoting what the UN Secretary General during the first meeting of the state parties of the TPNW. Let's eliminate nuclear weapons before nuclear weapons eliminate us. So this is a zero-sum game between human being and nuclear weapon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhadi. Very clear and precise. Thank you for your last quote as well. So since it's the youth forum, we've got a few youths joining us today. Let's talk about the TPNW and the role of ASEAN youth. So we have here Ms. Pantitra Patakan, also known as Ariel Karn. She is a research team director at the New Global Order, student in Armament and Disarmament Studies Scholarship recipient of the IAEA Maria Sklodowsky Curie Fellowship. She is a recipient of the IAEA Scholarship at the Middlebury Institute Master of Arts in the Non-Proliferation and Tourism Studies. She runs a research team at the New Global Order in Rome, Italy. Her area of expertise and research rests on the Indo-Pacific's non-proliferation and third nuclear age affairs, including emerging technology, multi-domain deterrence, strategic non-nuclear weapons, and dual-capable dilemma. She also recently joined the Pacific Forum as one of the young leaders. We have here Ms. Ariel Karn. Thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well, and I must say I'm very excited to be speaking and be here among all Southeast Asian youths. You have no idea how much joyful that is. I was recently at the Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference in Moscow, and in the room of somewhat 100 participants, I just stare, like, where are my fellow Southeast Asian? And there's three of them, and three of us. So you have no idea how much joyful it is to be here today. So yeah, thank you for having me.
We are delighted to have you here. So let's jump in to our first question. So how can we ensure that the ASEAN youth opinions are heard in the international discussions on nuclear disarmament? And why should ASEAN youth care about the TPNW?
Okay, let me tackle the second one first. And why do we care about the TPNW? Okay. So I think that's led us back to the more foundation question of why do you care about disarmament in general? Which I think will be, incorporate this answer later on in our discussion. But so assuming you already have that, because for me, the process of answering that question is almost spiritual. Like when I tell people, like, like my research areas on ADN, which is arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation, and then people were like, nuclear weapons, like why? I like, you have like two kind of response, like if you're talking to the people from Southeast Asia, and you either have like, oh my god, nuclear weapons, like wow, what is that? Like and the other one are like all the skeptics, like but why? Like we're under, like, those who study political science, they go, oh, but we're like under the nuclear weapon free zones, like why you have to bother about it? And it can even goes deeper to the more philosophical question, the older generation posed, like, why do you have to like worry about everybody else? Just worry about your own country, like you're a developing country. Worry about poverty, worry about income inequality. So this is almost like a spiritual question that you need to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, why us as someone from your country and this region needs to care about disarmament. And we'll talk about this later on. But once again, assuming you already have that question answered, I'm just gonna go ahead and say TPNW is a pretty good way to go when you wanted to promote disarmament in the world. And it's a good way to go for us as countries under the nuclear weapon free zone, and also of course a non-nuclear state country. So because TPNW, like our distinguished scholars, the previous two distinguished scholars has mentioned that it's the product of the not very so well worked Article 6 of the NPT, the which is the article that discussed the efforts for disarmament from the nuclear weapon states. And so this is like a fight of a country like ours, like, wait, why don't you do this thing? I mean, every time people tell me, like, they're happy that there is TPNW, they're like, finally we have our voices heard. For me personally, I find it a bit bothering, because I mean, I wish NPT would have worked in the first place. I mean, there's a lot of, like, as Mr. Sugiono has mentioned, that this is the TPNW is necessary for the disarmament in terms of the world efforts. But yeah, again, so we need to fight for this, and we wanted to make it work. Yeah, so that is the why the RCNU needs to care about the TPNW. And the on the how to ensure that the opinion is heard, I believe that these are the something that would require a bit more of professional in somewhat an advocacy, to discuss about the participation of the public, how to engage youth, how to engage people into a strategic conversation, because this is not an affair that was easily engaged. This is a challenge that everybody who wants that to make sure that the voice of the youth in the region like ours are heard in affairs like nuclear weapons. It's not something easy to engage, because for a minute it will sound cool. It will sound like you want to be part of it, but then once you are part of it, then it's gonna go all the way to the part where it's no longer, this fire, it's not hot anymore. Nobody cares about it. Nobody talks about it anymore. But how to make sure that they still stay? That's a very, very important question to ask. And so, how to ensure the opinion of the young Southeast Asian? So, for my part, I would like to sort of challenge the foundation question to this question, and that is, what exactly needed to be heard? What is your opinion about this TPNW? It is something that I cannot provide, cannot tell you what to think, right? So what exactly is that you care about the TPNW? Like, you need to, of course, study the TPNW. You need to understand, the dynamics of the problems of nuclear weapons in the region. So answer that question first, and then once you have came with the answer of what exactly needed to be heard, then who needs to hear it? Then you tackle that question, and that would be how you ensure that the opinions is heard. So yeah.
Seems like our youth have some homework to do to answer those questions in order to move on to the how our voice can be heard. So what would be your suggestions on what steps can young people in ASEAN take to promote the TPNW, or just to learn more in general?
In terms of like the step, I think the first step again is like I don't think there's anything too distinguished from a common way of advocating voice of young people in, again, the strategic affairs, and something in a macro level like climate change. And I like to refer to one of my favorite book ever called The Second Nuclear Age by Paul Baccarin. And in the book he mentioned that it's very important for us when we trying to argue for disarmament affairs that we held closely the elements of the humanitarian aspect of it, the humanitarian impact of it, like what Professor Muhadi has mentioned about the existential risk because the nuclear weapon is not like other type of weapons. It's not tanks, right? It's not just guns. It's not small arms, light weapons. So it has that emotional, so to speak, like an emotional impacts on the public in general, the same way that genocide has. So that is very important foundation in order to combine it with in the steps that you are taking when you are trying to advocate for the TPNW, like make sure that you insist on the fact that you know, it's the nuclear weapons actually have an impact on life. So yeah.
You think is it possible? In what way? How can we track our success in the effort to take these steps?
When I hear the term track, I always think of the milestone. And when I think of the milestone, I think of datas. All right, that was weird. Okay. So think about the SDG, right? Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have goals, and we have set of goals, and we have set of indicators, because that is something that you do when you need to track your success, right? You set up the indicators. So that means, I mean, indicator, it doesn't have to be as specific as the SDG goals. It can be just, you know, a big picture, like a milestone, like I said, like what do we want it to see? You know, the number of youths that engage more, I mean, the more, I don't know, even just Google search. Like there's people in the region now like looking at for, you know, the affairs about the nuclear weapons more or not. That's like very practical way to do it. But I mean, think about the big picture first. Like what is it that you wanted to see? And I think that this is not something hard to do, because I think young people have a lot of ideas, and we have a lot of experts in scholar who would love to support that, and along with other advocacy institution to do so. But the problem is it's the in order to track the success means that you need to collect a certain information, a certain discussion, and to do it together. That's the point. And how do we do that? How do we create a networks of like people who works in the area? How do we connect, you know, people in different sectors? How do we connect youths, you know, in itself? So that is a very important question. So first, fundamental question, do that, like create a network of people who work in the area, of who are interested in the area, and of course try to engage more people in the conversation. Although I must say, instead of focusing in regarding the quantity of the people who are coming into the conversation, you know, what I really like to say to my fellow people who are enthusiasts in this area is that it's one thing to make sure people present in your campaign, so to speak. It's another to make sure they engage, and it's a whole different level to make sure they commit. And whenever you try to, you know, take a steps for both, you know, like to advocate or to track the process, like aim to engage and make sure they commit in this field. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ariel Karn. Now we just move on to the interactive discussion and Q&A from our audience. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write all your questions in the chat box, and we ask our speakers to answer your questions. Any questions? Okay, we've got one. How can ASEAN youth help our nations and communities promote the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? Maybe Ms. Ariel Karn, about the ASEAN youth.
Hi, sorry, I lost you a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how can ASEAN youth help our nations and communities promote the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons?
First of all, check out what your country is doing on the status of your country in relation to the treaty, and then study what could be the role of your country to provide in in the region. Okay, this is a bit too complicated. Okay, here's the thing. When you're doing this, nuclear weapon affairs related issue, what I would like to encourage you to think first is the biggest picture. Like, instead of thinking that you are, Thai's youth or Indonesian youths or, whatever, any country you're from, think first perhaps that you are the youths in the Indo-Pacific, and then see your relation of the ASEAN region to the Indo-Pacific, and then see the relation of your country to the ASEAN. And then when you see that, you could possibly derive the role of your country in relations to the region and what's bigger than that. And that is how you could potentially convince the authority of your country, like, hey, you need to care about TPNW because this and that. And then of course other practical steps of creating advocacy, or even a think tank or youth-led think tank, stuff like that. That's something needed to train. And again, you might not like me saying this, but you have to study. Yeah. So yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
Thank you. You can press the raise hand button over here if you have a question that you would like to ask our speakers, or you can write in a chat box. Any questions from our audience? We got a one. Okay, how can I avoid conflict when I promote campaign about TPNW to friends who are from countries that are collecting nuclear weapons? It's a good question. Who would like to answer this question?
Perhaps I can take that because I have the experience of working with a lot of people who are from the country that collects nuclear weapons. First of all, you you tell them that a deterrence theory it's not really working. In the sense that people who are a huge believer of a deterrence theory say that nuclear weapon is necessarily for international security. And so if they ever brought it up, would you just go ahead and say, but when will it end? Like, one country is gonna keep building and the other is gonna keep building more, and so just that's somewhat a logical reason. But I would like to say generally just tell them that it's very important to promote disarmament because we are human beings, and nuclear arms are what beyond the existential risk. I would like to say it's also impacts a country like ours, which is developing country, countries that have a lot of social issues. It impacts us in the way that it's just going to cause military spending to the point that we cannot bear. So yeah, I'm not saying that a country in our region are going to have a potential in the future armed with the nuclear weapons, but I'm saying that the ripple is going to impact us in the way that it will be too hard to bear in the future. So that is the argument that you can pull. Yeah.
Can I add a little bit?
Yes, please.
Yeah, especially because I used to work with peace and conflict issues, and my first response to this question is you should not avoid conflict. Conflict does not necessarily means to be avoided, but you have to confront conflict. So what I mean by that, the support for nuclear weapons are based on the very basic assumption of the effectiveness of deterrence. Okay, so you can ask your friends to provide you a convincing argument or data which can show that deterrence is actually working. Of course, they will say that deterrence worked very well in the sense that during the Cold War, there were no big confrontation between the US and the USSR. But the recent development, especially with the war in Ukraine, provide you a strong ammunition to confront those assumptions that nuclear weapon works. Nuclear weapons deterrence assumes that no nuclear weapons will attack other nuclear weapons. But the fact is, in the war in Ukraine, it becomes only an excuse not to stop the aggression of Russia to Ukraine by saying that if the US or NATO involved in the war, then it will create a nuclear weapon war. But the fact is, we see a long war in Ukraine. It has been in the second year now, with the suffering of the civilian and the catastrophic nature of war. How can we say that nuclear weapons can provide us with security? No, there is no security. Even in Europe, where several countries hosting nuclear weapons, like the Netherlands, Germany, but still Russia was able to attack Ukraine without fearing of the retaliation from the NATO members. So the nuclear weapon does not stop war. The Ukraine case is very clear. It's only a myth, a justification that they provide. So this can be a fact-based argument that you can provide to confront their arguments for the nuclear weapons.
Now that you mentioned the Ukrainian war, so how can we learn from their experiences, and how can we assist or amplify the voices of survivors of nuclear weapon use and testing?
Sorry, again? Are you following the question?
Yes, yeah. Like how can we learn from their experiences, and how can we assist and amplify the voices of survivors of nuclear weapon use or testing?
Yes, the Ukrainian war simply shows us that nuclear deterrence does not work. It does not deter Russia from attacking other countries, even when the Ukraine was supported by NATO member countries. Among the NATO member countries have nuclear weapons, like the UK and the US. But it still gives the courage for the Russian to attack Ukraine without fearing that the nuclear weapon will be used by the US. So this is the real argument. So this means that the only things is that another important lesson that we can learn from the Ukrainian war is that the first is that deterrence does not work in this case, and the second, the potential for nuclear war is bigger and greater, because Russia has posed a threat. If Russia felt threatened by the US and the NATO, then it will use the nuclear weapons. So the potential for the nuclear war is even greater. So it does, nuclear weapons do not work as a deterrence, but the potential for nuclear war is even greater with the existence of nuclear war.
We got one more question. Who are the Asian countries who are preventing their ratification of the TPNW in Asia?
I think, Mr. Hamzah, probably you remember, 7 countries already ratified the TPNW. The only country, I think Cambodia, Laos, and Singapore. Singapore even hasn't signed the TPNW.
All right. We have time for one last question. So what can ASEAN youth do to mobilize and encourage neutral countries to adopt TPNW? From Singapore.
Okay, this is a very, very unique case because I was in charge during the negotiation process of the adoption of nuclear weapons, TPNW, to approach the Singaporean delegation. And the response of the Singaporean delegation was very simple. Okay, we don't have any problem with TPNW, but we will only adopt TPNW if the US does. So Singapore will definitely not adopt TPNW unless the US does. So the only thing that we can do is by mobilizing the youth support internally in Singapore itself to push the government to change the mind and the position. And I think there is one thing that the youth can use is a survey by ICRC in 2021. The ICRC conducted a survey with the title Millennial on War. So among the survey, it was asked the youth, this is the survey among the youth, it was asked whether or not they have fear about the possibility of nuclear weapons. Majority of the youth said that they are fearing of the nuclear weapon, and they believe that nuclear war can take place within 10 years. So with that in mind, then you can use this data to speak up much louder and send your messages to the government that we, the youth, don't want nuclear war to happen, and we want the government to support nuclear disarmament.
Thank you, Mr. Muhadi. So any last words from our speakers before we conclude everything, Ms. Ariel, Mr. Hamzah? Anything else you'd like to add to our youth who are very interested in this issue and are here with us today?
If I may, Madam Moderator, just to briefly add to the very insightful points shared by Dr. Muhadi. Regarding the earlier question on lessons that we can learn from the ongoing crisis, one, it's clear that we cannot rely on status quo. The fact that today our region is at peace and relative harmony, we cannot assume that it will always be that. 5 or 10 years ago, region of East Europe was relatively peaceful, but not quite today. Yeah. So status quo does not last. We have to think, be proactive, and be prepared. Second, do not rely entirely on the geopolitical dynamics. Will continue to shift and evolve. If today countries are having good relations, that will not be the case 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So geopolitical dynamics are shifting and changing. Because of that, it's very tricky and we have to be mindful of that. Third point is the question about our region and certain countries and lack of progress and so on and so forth. We need to be thinking about our collective responsibility. One country cannot continue to exist at the risk of others' compromise security interests. At the end of the day, talking about nuclear weapons is not like, as colleagues mentioned, it's not about like conventional weapons. We cannot be isolated from the rest of the world. If one weapon were to be used, the entire region is finished. So we cannot be thinking about individual countries' responsibility or security because it doesn't work that way when it comes to nuclear weapons. And my last point is policymakers at the end of the day listened to the people on the ground, people around the street, the youth, students, young people who are making their voice heard. So because of that, I think at the end of the day, the power is in the people, the power is in the youth, and make full use of it. And I think this engagement today is the right platform to continue the momentum moving forward. Thank you for the invitation once again.
Thank you, Mr. Hamzah. Any final thoughts and words of encouragement for our youth, Ms. Ariel, Mr. Muhadi?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So I'm just gonna go. I'm going to say briefly. As someone who's has worked with a lot of amazing, brilliant minds, young minds around the world. I think one of the things that I think I'm going to sound more like a professor than the actual professor who sit here, but I would like to encourage all the youth to study up, read about nuclear weapons, read about international politics, read about what it is actually that you get yourself into when you are interested in these affairs. It's not something easy, and I think we don't say this enough in advocacy, but I think we're saying it too much in academia. Like it's not it's something very complicated. It's a complicated issue that you need a lot of like a basic foundation and understanding in order to stay engaged, in order to understand what's going on, in order to come out with the solution, because you can't make change if you don't have the ideas. You don't know what that change is needed, what that change could be built, what foundation that change should be built upon. So yeah, so that is for me. But don't feel discouraged. There's brilliant of readings for you to do. There's brilliant of resources for you to get access to, and there's a lot of people who are ready to talk to you about this affair. So just reach out. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Ariel. Mr. Muhadi?
Yeah, I just would like to support Mr. Hamzah and Ariel said. First of all, that there is nothing that cannot be changed. We can change for good. And some big changes actually come from a small thing. So we seem to see today the nuclear weapon as a reality of international politics, but we can change it. It is not something not written in the stone. So any move counts in this case. So first of all, TPNW is not about making an immediate change to the reality of the nuclear weapons in the world, but it creates a pathways in which the change can take place. And in all changes in the world, the youth always play important role. And it is time for you to play an important role as well to change the world for better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhadi. Wow, what a great, informative, fruitful, inspiring sharing from our three speakers, Ms. Ariel Karn, Mr. Muhadi Sugiono, and Mr. Hamzah. Thank you very much for being here with us today. As a new grad, great words of encouragement. Keep studying, keep reading more, keep joining forums like this that we hopefully that we can organize more in the future. So before we get into the session of how can youth or us, our audience, get involved with this, can we have a quick group photo before we move on to the last session? If you're can please turn on your camera, show us your big smile, our future young leaders. And then our Mr. Bond, we take a quick photo for us.
Yes, it's me. Thank you. Thank you, boy. Okay, ready? Give you 10 seconds to turn on your camera, just in case it's delayed. Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we just start now. Okay, everyone smile. 3, 2, 1. Okay, one picture again. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Great smile. Our young leaders, future young leaders. So now let's talk more about the how can we get involved, and we have a brief discussion about the RTT. So I give the floor to Mr. Bond. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Khun Poi, for expertly moderating the previous session. As we continue discussing promoting the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons among ASEAN youth, we move on to our next session on how can youth can get involved. This is a brief discussion about the RTT. Mr. Christine will provide valuable insights on how the youth can promote the TPNW and achieve nuclear disarmament. So let's delve into this discussion and explore the various ways in which we can make a difference. Mr. Christine?
Yes, hi everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. I'm just going to share screen. So I won't go into the whole thing, I'll keep it really short, but I just wanted to talk about really briefly about Reverse the Trend, Save Our People, Save Our Planet. It's a new initiative that was established in 2021, and it really focuses on amplifying the voices of young people from frontline communities who've been affected by both nuclear weapons and climate change. We do a lot of youth empowerment. This is members of our project coordinators. So we have lovely Umayam of Bomb Shelter Policy Arts Collective, Danielle Samler from the Lawyers Committee, Nuclear Policy, myself, and very recently, Sanjani Patel has also joined us as a project coordinator. So we offer a toolkit for young people to really, learn about the information, the facts about nuclear weapons and climate change and how they relate to one another, a community forum and now a Discord channel, an academic journal. I know, Ariel, I believe you published a piece for us, a curriculum with a comprehensive set of lesson and educational plans, and an ongoing docu-series. And just really, really quickly, I just wanted to highlight what we did at the first meeting of state parties. I apologize. So this is our group photo with all of our really great youth coordinators from our different chapters. We had representatives from our Pacific chapter, Canada, as well as the US, and we're hoping to expand that for the second MSP. And we also hosted an international youth orientation at the Embassy of Ireland in Vienna. So we had youth from around the world, including peace messengers from Nagasaki, as well as the ICRC. We had a representative from the Marshallese Educational Initiative, and so forth, and as well as representatives from different states. So it was a really great opportunity for young people to deliver statements and to really engage with one another. And then we also co-delivered, one of our representatives, Marcina Langrid, co-delivered the International Youth Statement at the first meeting of state parties. And it was really powerful for the states to hear from young people. And we collaborated very closely with the really great Youth for TPNW organization. We also engage in creative arts. So we believe that there's a lot of power in working with young people through the arts, through paintings and multimedia. So we did a series of paintings with the Marshallese Educational Initiative, MEI, and exhibited them at Amnesia Atomica, which was sponsored by Times Square Arts, as well as the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And it was really great to engage with New Yorkers and everyone in the world, who are in New York, who came to New York that in May. And then we also have a really great documentary called A Journey Home, which is based on a community poem by Marshallese youth on the many meanings of home, be it Arkansas, where most of them are based here in the US, but as well as actual Marshall Islands. And that poem and the video really highlights their feelings about nuclear weapons, nuclear disarmament, and the legacy of US nuclear tests that occurred on their atolls, which are small islands. It has been shown at the Hawaii International Film Festival, as well as the Asian American Philadelphia Festival, and it's about to be entered into the New York Film Festival. So these are our social media, our Instagram and Reverse TT, Twitter, it's the same, and our Facebook. And then I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Phoebe, who can talk about RTT South and Southeast Asia. So I'm going to stop share.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Phoebe. I am part of RTT South and Southeast Asia chapter. So as you can tell, for everyone with the U-Form background, we are part of 4 people of the same team. We have 3 representatives from Thailand, Waznu is actually from Indonesia, and myself is from Singapore. And we are working really hard to mobilize ASEAN youths to support TPNW and also to raise awareness about TPNW. We understand the challenges that our region has with this issue. And we're hoping more people can join us and also amplify the voices that surrounds this topic and to be educating each other on the subject matter. I believe most of us have very limited knowledge coming in, so please don't be intimidated. It's okay if you have zero knowledge, because that's really where we really start. And so we hope to meet more people and to have more people understand what we are trying to do here, and to have more creative ideas to promote TPNW and also peace efforts. So thank you so much for coming today.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll send out a a form, a Google form to all of our attendees, just in case if they would like to sign up to join our wonderful RTT South and Southeast Asia chapter. Yes, so on that note, I would like to thank everyone for coming to this really great event, and thank you all for spending your mornings, your early morning. I think it's like in some areas it's like 10 a.m. Nothing, with us. Thank you so much, and we'll definitely be in touch with everyone.
So thank you very much, Chris. As we come to the end of our youth forum on the promoting the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons among ASEAN youth, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists and moderator for their insightful contributions to this critical discussion. We thank Kun Amir, Hamzah, Nasir, Multilateral Security Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia, for providing us with the general remark about the TPNW and highlighting its importance in the ASEAN region. We also very grateful to Dr. Muhadi, the lecturer at the Department of International Relations and a researcher at the Institute of International Studies, Universitas Gadjah Mada, for sharing your insight on regional universalization effort and examining the TPNW. Last but not least, we would like to thank Kun Ariel Karn, the research team director at the New Global Order, for enlightening us on the role of ASEAN youth in promoting their TPNW. We also thank our moderator, Ms. Kun Tipsa Korn, for expertly leading us through this important discussion and keeping us on track. Super last but not least again, we would like to thank our event sponsor, Reverse Train Southeast Asia Chapter, Forum for Nation Building Nepal, and AIT Sustainability Club, Nuclear Disarmament 101, Be Human, Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. And for your information, Reverse the Train is a youth initiative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. And finally, we would like to thank everyone who joined us today. Your active participation and engagement in this forum show your commitment to promoting nuclear disarmament and building a safer world for all. Let us continue to work together towards this important goal, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Bond, for being the most active youth young person ever. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, do we want to do debrief for the organizers to stay on?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to stop the recording.